Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 917. I had the white pieces and started off with d4. My opponent went with e6. You can see e6 is the third choice here. It's a little bit offbeat, but it can transpose after e6. If I were to play e4, the most normal move, then this would transpose into a French defense, or could. Black could still play with this funny c6 setup, but he's not. It's not necessary. And after c4, with e6, you can continue with f5 and get a Dutch defense. So it's an interesting kind of transposition trick, this e6 move. Anyway, I continued with c4 rather than e4. I was wanting to play a queen's pawn type of game. And then he didn't go with any of the normal moves. Like I said, f5 here transposes into a Dutch. D5. I'm not quite sure what to call that. Oh, that's a queen's gambit declined if you play d5 there. And knight f6 looks like you're trying to play a Nimzo-Indian. But he went with c6. And now we're pretty much in uncharted territory. I played e4, which is the most normal move here, just grabbing a big stake in the center. I have to say, though, looking at this in the chess engine, this is still a playable opening. So if you want some offbeat opening where you can get some moves in quickly, often it's useful to have as a blitz weapon. This is the kind of opening you can play because, nobody's going to stop you from playing moves like c6 and e6. And they can't be stopped. And then he played with d5 here. So in the video, I think I muttered something about a gambit. This is the martial gambit in the Slav defense if you play knight c3 here. And you can see you normally get to this position by a different move order. Here there's only 3 games in the database, whereas after knight c3 there's almost 300 games in the database. The normal move order would be, say, black plays a Slav defense, white has the knight on c3, and then black plays e6, setting up the semi-Slav triangle, and white responds with e4. That would be the normal way to get to that position. But we could get to it with knight c3. So while we're here, I just thought I would show you a couple of ideas of the this martial gambit in the semi-Slav, which you have to give the full title, because otherwise the martial gambit refers to the line in the Ruy Lopez. That's the more famous martial gambit. This is actually not a bad gambit. I looked up a little bit of the history. This position has been reached before, and after the exchange here, knight takes this check. Previously, white has just retreated the knight to c3. Kind of makes sense. And that is not a gambit. That is, and it's still a decent position for white, so certainly that's playable. But the second move, or the top choice here, this is Marshall's invention. Steinitz, for example, had played that other line with the bishop just retreating, or with the knight just retreating. So this was Marshall's invention, the bishop d2 move, and this is what turns it into a gambit. So you block the check, and you threaten to take the bishop, and black ignores that and grabs a pawn. So you take the bishop, and black gets the knight here with check, and then you block with your bishop. And so this is the position. Now black doesn't have to play this way, but this is how the martial gambit goes. And it's a position where white has decent compensation. I guess I'll put it that way. So black can play this, but also white has compensation for the pawn. So it's if you like gambit play, if you like active pieces, you might have some fun with this. And it's not considered good to keep taking pawns. Now you're down 2 pawns, but you get so many free moves here, harassing that queen. Look at that huge lead in development that white has for 2 pawns. And if you look at this with the chess engine, it still thinks that black has white has an edge here. So you definitely have compensation for the pawns, and it can be interesting to play. The more quiet way of playing the martial gambit, playing against the martial gambit, is to play with knight a6, kicking the bishop around. And in this position, even though white's a pawn down, it seems to be about even. Okay, so let's go back to the game. I was not in the mood to play the martial gambit. I don't know too many of the ideas. I think you really need to play a gambit a few times to get some experience with it before you can really do it well. So I tend to avoid gambits I don't know. But it seems to be playable. if you're interested in adding a gambit to your repertoire. That's something, because black will often play this kind of triangle setup. It's not all that uncommon in the other move order. Maybe he's going for a Cambridge Springs. He can get into this kind of pawn triangle. Anyway, so I just avoided all of his gambit lines by taking here. And this is also a position which is okay for white. So I haven't given up my opening advantage by playing like this. And then here he went bishop b4 check, and we're outside the opening book. But all this should be playable for black as well as for white, and white still has that opening edge. So there's really nothing going wrong in this part of the game. Let's see, he went knight e7. I think it's a little bit peculiar. I think knight f6 is a little more to the point. But he had a specific idea here. Let's see, I went bishop d3. And this was his idea, was f5. And now f5 is classified by the chess engine as a mistake, although it doesn't immediately find an immediate refutation. But just to back up, normal play from here would be taking. This gives me the isolated queen's pawn. This is what I was expecting. Black castles, I castles. And this is a good IQP position for white. I'd be happy to play this kind of position. I have ideas of pushing the pawn forward to dissolve it, but I also have very active pieces, and my rooks can go on to these files. So, and I have a lead in development here. So I think that's a good IQP position for white. So I'd be fine with that. But he went with f5, and now the chess engine says white is just winning. And oddly enough, it doesn't give a forced line until later. So just castling seems to be keeping that winning advantage. And so we'll stop at the point where I give away the winning edge here, because we get back to a position which is more or less even after a while. Let's see, he retreated the bishop, played rook e1. All this seems to be keeping a winning edge. Let's see, he went knight d7. Not necessarily top moves, but winning, keeping that winning edge anyway. And then I took on d5 here. So here's the chance. Here's the forced line that the chess engine finds, which leads to the win. So you can understand why the chess engine likes this position for white, other than obviously white has a little more space and a better development. Black's pieces are a bit tangled up, but you sometimes have the knight blocking the bishop. But you have to look for those lines that are going to convert this positional edge into a material edge, and here there is one. So it starts with queen e2, which I actually thought about during the game, but I thought he would just block with rook e8, and my queen opposite his rook. I wasn't sure that was any good, but I overlooked that I have this move queen e6 check, which just wins a piece. So that's one reason why queen e2 is a good move. Another try here is suppose black just keeps developing, like knight f6 is kind of the normal developing move here, opening up a line for the bishop. But there's a problem here, which is c5. c5 pushes this bishop back, and now the knight is hanging. So this also wins a piece. So to avoid losing a piece, black is actually forced to play the move rook f7, and then you can play knight to g5 and win at least the exchange here. So anyway, it's pretty annoying. Let's see, could the knight have moved away? Yeah, if the knight just moves, then once again I have queen e6 with check. So however black plays, he's losing material at this point, and it starts with this queen e2 move. So that's the way to convert that advantage. So after I trade here, I was kind of tired of worrying about that IQP position. I just wanted to simplify things a little bit, but it was a bad idea at that point. I wanted to get this knight into this square, but he played some clever moves here. Let's see, better than knight e5. Yeah, knight e5 turns out to be a bit of a mistake. Better was bishop to g5, still with this idea of putting pressure on his knight there. So knight to e5. It's also bringing out my last undeveloped piece, so if I just followed basic principles, I would have found that move. Anyway, knight e5. He went knight f6 now. And I went with f3. This is not bad. It keeps the knight out of these squares, but it does have a weakness, which is it opens up this diagonal towards my king, pins that pawn, and threatens to take it. And so I played the move knight to b5. I could have actually played bishop e3. I was wondering about this during the game. because he can't take on b2. Knight to a4 actually traps the queen. So bishop e3 would have been a simpler way to play than what I played. I went knight to b5, although it turns out that this is not a bad move. But, well, there were some saving moves I had to find, so obviously I didn't calculate this one through before playing it. First of all, he grabbed my knight here. He didn't have to do that. It's just a trade, and he's giving up his bishop. So I have the bishop pair after this. But, you know, he's trying to exploit. He's getting rid of, you know, pieces that defend this pawn, I guess. Is that true? Actually, that knight is not defending the pawn. Maybe he was worried about some tactics with the knight coming in here. Anyway, just got rid of that knight. Played knight to c6, hitting my rook. Just dropped my rook back, and then he played a6, kicking my knight. And so this was his idea, I guess, with those moves, is to kick my knight away so that this pawn is undefended. And at the same time, he's brought another piece to attack the pawn. So I just dropped my knight back to c3 after a while. I realized that bishop to e3 was going to be a strong move, regardless of what he played here. And so, yeah, it's actually just a mistake to take that pawn. If he is going to take it, queen d4 he could try. But the queen gets kicked around. It doesn't get trapped this time. But, you know, I get my bishop back to a good square. Let's see, he could come back here. Drop the bishop back to c2, and I'm starting to round up this guy. If he defends, I can put on pressure like this. And even though I'm a pawn down in this position, and you know, there may be ideas, well, instead of defending, he could also have considered pushing that pawn. He may be able to hold on to that pawn for a while, but in any case, the chess engine gives an advantage to white. So it seems like this is a good position for white, more than enough compensation for the pawn, if black manages to hold on to it. So grabbing the pawn is actually bad, but grabbing it with the knight is worse. And after this, he's just down material, because there's just no way to escape. The knight is pinned. There's no piece that can come defend it, and I can easily increase the pressure by moving this bishop out of the way. So, and the knight, the queen can't unpin. That's the other point. It can't come to a square like this, where it can defend the knight from the side. So yeah, that knight is just stuck in a pin and is going to be lost. Let's see, what did he try here? So he just started trying crazy moves here to complicate things. He tried knight e4, so it's just giving up a piece. And then I dropped my bishop down, and then he brought this knight in with check to try and disrupt my king side, and brought his queen over with check. But none of this works. Even the move bishop g2, which I decided not to play because of e takes f3, this still actually is okay for white, although it's not the best. Black gets material back here, but I can take this pawn with check, and then so he blocks. Then I can block here, and now he can grab the bishop, but I'll still be a piece up, and he won't have enough compensation for that. So even that is playable, but it's simpler to avoid that and just step the king out of the way. He goes ahead and takes, because I've got these checkmating squares all covered here. Let's see. So he took, I went with queen takes d5 now. I went bishop e6. I blocked here with the queen. Want to try and get a trade in. He came in here. And here the best move is bishop d4. I spotted this move later and played it at a time when it wasn't the best move. But right now, you know, it looks like there might be threats here, but there aren't any actual threats. And so, because those squares are covered, so I should really, you know, I don't really need to play a defensive move like queen g3. I should really just go on the attack. I mean, this bishop, this move bishop to d4, not only threatens the mate, but it also threatens rook takes bishop. So, so it's a good move. Anyway, so queen g3, not the best. He takes a pawn here. I bring my knight over. I want to defend against this pawn push here. He goes ahead and pushes anyway, and gives him this check, which I block, and he takes. So now my knight is pinned, but he just doesn't have enough force here. He tries to bring in the other rook, and well, I bring my rook over so that I can take back the bishop with the rook without having to worry about the queen taking my rook. So he grabbed another pawn here, And then I played bishop d4, threatening the mate, which he allowed. But it's funny. I just didn't notice the queens were opposing each other. So if we back up, my best move here was rook to d7, just going on the attack. And that makes sense. After bishop d4, his best move was to trade. And after this, I'm still 2 pieces up for 3 pawns. It would be a long game, but I should still be winning, or longer anyway. But after this, when he takes the rook, I can just mate him, and that's how the game ended. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you later. Bye.